Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third already. We're already at 3 digital badge show and tells here with our hashtag BadgeCat K-12 community. Thank you for joining us, whether you are here with us live or watching this recorded on YouTube. Joined, as always, with our awesome co-moderator, Sarah Thomas, as well as Rich Dixon with the PDLI out in California. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
And Rich, really appreciate you just being willing to share y'all's work that you're doing with teachers and with digital badging. Folks are just so hungry for exemplars of this work, and we're all kind of figuring it all out as we go. And it takes just a lot of courage, I think, to be willing to put yourself out there and share stuff, even though we know it's not yet perfect, and we're still in development and just every day continuously improving to get there. So just thanks for your willingness to be vulnerable and put your work out there for everybody else to share.
Hey, you're most welcome.
I guess before we dive into your badges, can you just tell us a little bit about the PDLN?
Yeah, you bet. So a little bit of background both for myself and the company is that I spent years, been involved with K-12 education for over 20 years, both as a classroom teacher. I was an EdTech coordinator, curriculum coordinator, an administrator. Had a lot of different roles over the years, but one constant has been educational technology and working to implement that more effectively to individualize instruction for students and make it more meaningful. And to that end, concurrently over those years, I was always involved with training other professionals, and whether it was co-presenting or presenting on my own. And so it's to that end that PD Learning Network was developed by other educators just like myself who also have similar experiences, backgrounds, and passions. In particular, how we can start to tackle the task of making professional development more meaningful and more individualized. And so that's real quickly the background on the company. The work that we do is creating digital badges around professional development that attends to different EdTech topics, and we'll get into some of those details in just a bit.
Awesome, yeah, and I know that you prepared a couple slides to share with us so that we can not only hear about your work there, but also see it firsthand. So I'll give you a second to pull that up for us and share your screen. And while Rich is doing that, know that you can tweet your questions using the hashtag BadgeChatK12 in order to engage Rich, as well as using the Q&A app on this Hangout on Air. And we'll definitely be monitoring both of those feeds, as well as if you post any comments on our event page on the Google+. So, Rich, it looks like the first thing we're going to talk about with the digital badges is the actual design process that you're using at the Professional Development Learning Network.
Yeah, I thought we'd go ahead and just kind of describe what our process has been, because as I continue to work with teachers and interact with others, whether it's during our Monday Badge Chat K-12 time or with others, often the question comes up of how are badges effectively created and what are some of the common elements there. And so I thought I'd just share our journey. We certainly don't feel we've got a lock on everything, and certainly enjoy any questions that you might have that would be able to help us as we continue to think about this, both as a broader group of individuals that include all of you around badges, as well as the work that we're doing here. So as I mentioned before, PD Learning Network awards digital badges and micro-credentials for competency-based EdTech PD for K-12 educators. And so our site at PDLN looks like that, and so the initials PDLN. And I thought I'd just take us right into the different elements of badging and how we've looked at this in order to tackle the problem of how to better individualize and make more meaning out of PD for K-12 educators. And so here's a list of some of the different elements and considerations that we are grappling with and working through as we build up our badges. And so one of them is just the goal of being able to create individual learning pathways. And so let's take a look at what that actually means. So oftentimes in the past, when I've presented on an EdTech topic, whether it's Google Hangouts or whatever the topic might be, there was always a group of people in the room that were ready to just run ahead real quickly. They already had a lot of knowledge. In fact, they might even be able to lead that professional development. But because of the situation where we're just sitting in one room, they really can't move too much further ahead. We also have a group in the room that's kind of following at different levels of what's important to them, and they're getting a lot out of it. And then there's usually another group that's kind of like, oh, I can't wait till this gets over. This is not important to me, or it doesn't feel like it at the moment. And so to kind of crack that nut of how do we really engage people? How do we transform them so that they go back and make the best use of the training so that the kids have a more meaningful learning environment? We started thinking about how we can break down bigger chunks of learning into smaller bits. And I'm going to be going through those learning pathways in just a minute. But it's that breaking things up into small chunks and allowing individuals to have choice over their learning and how they get to learning outcomes is really what I mean there by individual learning pathways. The next element is skill acquisition. And I want to differentiate and call this out because this is an important aspect for us. Skill acquisition, meeting an objective, being able to acquire skills and or knowledge that are then applied is really important. Let's kind of contrast that with a seat time model. I just painted an example where giving PD, people are in a different location, they're in a different spot mentally with their skill sets, but they're all stuck in the same room at the same time going through the same information. And so one of the challenges and one of the opportunities I think with badges is having the ability to have people just focus on acquiring the skills rather than somehow equating the amount of time they're in a seat to meaning competency. And we're going to dive into that in a couple other slides too. So the proof of competency part is something we're going to talk about as well. Within badging, as most of you know, one of the wonderful things about badges is that there's been some, in order to be awarded a badge, digital badge in this case, some demonstration of competency around a particular topic is part of the process. And so that was another element that was really important, is to build in that proof of competency. And then a fourth bit is third-party evaluation, and that may be a little bit different. Again, remember our audience here is professional development for K-12 educators. So if you're a classroom teacher and you're thinking about the application and relevancy of this to your students, you would probably be the evaluator, meaning you're the person that would review the competency, you know, the standards, the objectives, the students best. But one of the challenges sometimes for bigger district initiatives outside of a classroom can be, how do we make a badging initiative more sustainable? And part of that is the evaluation process. I've seen some great examples of wonderful badging initiatives where different school districts have taken skill sets that teachers have learned and then focused those skill sets and awarded and recognized those achievements through badges, but at the end haven't been able to find enough time to have a person within their district evaluate. And so one of the things that we're fortunate within this company is having 16 years with a sister company that's next to us. It's done years of evaluating through the use of rubrics, a number of different learning artifacts. And so what we are able to do is have them be able to evaluate using an open rubric to provide rigor and relevancy to the evaluations. Because I think, and Noah, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, but it seems like one of the things that has been a challenge is trying to create portable meaning that transcends just the graphic image itself, where someone can vouch for the actual skills that have been learned, and who is vouching for that, and how do we know that that's rigorous? And so that's something else that was really an important element. So I'm going to pause there. No,
yeah, I really love that idea around. Sorry, I'm getting a little echo of myself. I really love that idea about our trust in who's issuing these badges, right? That when we see these digital badges, we can trust in them, and I think that's really important. And we do have one question coming in from Jennifer about how we do chunk in the learning that you were talking about in those pathways. I know that you've got that coming up, so Jennifer, hold tight. We'll be getting to that momentarily. I know Rich has a slide about that he's going to talk about. Before we get there, Rich, and just want to remind anybody who's watching live, you can tweet your questions at us using hashtag BadgeChatK12. You can also use the Q&A app on this Google Hangout on Air, and we will make sure to get your question to Rich. Rich, when you were talking about, you know, the skill acquisition piece, and you made it really clear that you're really trying to get away from seat time, and something that, and I really like that and value that. And I also think that sometimes when we look at these digital badges, we find folks using it where the criteria is not just about meeting the competency, but actually going above and beyond. And I get this sense from your system that it's not about going above and beyond. It's did you acquire this skill or didn't you? And can you maybe speak to that before you go on to your next slide?
Yeah, you bet. So when we work with our different courses, you can see in the next slide here a number of different courses where we have content around EdTech skills, again, for K-12 educators. We are looking for that proficiency. Are they competent in being able to demonstrate certain skills? And we'll get into another slide that has that as an example. Or are they not? And we provide feedback if they're not on what they need to do. And it does bring up some really good questions in that we're so used to having a model where we're graded on a 100-point scale or ABC or even a rubric 1 through 4, 1 through 6, or whatever it is. And this model that we're really pursuing is there competency that's demonstrated or not? And one of the things that we do is we lay out what that means. So, for example, in the digital citizenship course, which I'll go to the next slide now, in this particular one, we have created a learning pathway for those individuals that are seeking to get knowledge around what digital citizenship is and be able to apply that in a meaningful way. And we create a learning pathway for them. We have, in this case, a number of different topics shown in the middle. So that digital badge, the arrow points to what it represents. Well, in this case, the learning pathway that we pre-created for individuals that choose to pursue this badge would include a number of different topics, which you can see in the middle there. But then those different sections and whatnot are actually broken up into different learning artifacts, different ways that people can acquire that knowledge. But let's take a quick look at that. That's on the right-hand side. So you can see that some of those learning objects that will help you to acquire that knowledge include things like ebooks and a note-taking guide, and videos and a book excerpt and a web page and whatnot. But we also know that people may have other resources that they want to take a look at, and that's completely great too. We just provide these as a framework, as a starting point, so that people don't have just a blank slate or a blank canvas to start from and feel overwhelmed. They actually have a structure that will help them to gain competency, and or they can go off, find their own resources and whatnot. But our end game is at the bottom where it says assessment of knowledge, and I know that's pretty small print, maybe hard to see. But that assessment of knowledge is where someone will upload their evidence of learning based off of a couple different choices that they have. They have 3 different choices. And the way that we've done this and structured those assignments is so that individuals have a broad variety of ways that they can demonstrate that competency. Our team of credentialed teachers, of which that's what we're made up of here, has gone out and created a number of different scenarios in which people in the classroom can demonstrate that knowledge, whether their kids are in session or if their kids happen to be on break in the summer, they can also attend to demonstrating competency as well. But it really goes back, Noah, to your question about competency. And again, within the course, through some more details and slides we won't have the time to take a look at today, all of those requirements are laid out ahead of time. And so the key for us really is providing an opportunity to have enough information, quality, rigorous information, to be able to acquire competencies around that particular topic, in this case, digital citizenship. So now I'm going to pause
Rich,
there.
for folks who are wondering about leveling, is that sort of middle slide where it has introduction, communications, literacy, etiquette, digital law? Are those sort of the 8 kind of micro levels that a teacher goes through in order to get to the digital citizenship kind of macro level badge?
Yes, that is, and it brings up a really good point. On our next slide, I want to demonstrate a couple different things on this slide. First is we have that badge, that course badge, that digital citizenship badge, which is created of all those components. But we also recognize that learners may not want or need our learning pathway. We've created something. It's kind of our framework. It's not unique to us. It's something that's general within educational technology, K-12. But certainly it's something that is a construct that we've laid down as a guide. But we know that there may be certain bits of knowledge that individuals want to learn. So for example, take a look at digital law, for example. So digital law, let's say that you as an educator or you in your building really want to focus just on that. You could earn a badge, what we call a micro badge, just on that particular topic without having to earn all the other ones. And then you could go to another course. So I'm going to flip back a couple of slides. So these are just some of the courses that we offer. So let's say that in that digital law, you then wanted to work with 21st century learning skills or something with social media, and you wanted to pull out discrete sections or chapters within that course. You could do that to build and stack your own individual badge that represents the learning pathway that you've selected. And I'm going to pause there to see if you've got questions.
Yeah, actually, we do. I can see that Nate Otto was definitely calling out the breaking up of learning opportunities by steps along the learning pathway. And then Don Present in Canada asks, are you using standard skills frameworks, ad hoc ones, or both? Who is recognizing these badges?
Great question. There's two different ways to go. We use the ISTE standards for our framework for educational technology, and it's just one that we've selected because we've been involved with that community for a long time with ISTE. And we use their recognized objectives and framework for how we structure these courses and the objectives that we obtain to. If you're familiar with ISTE, great. If not, you can Google them at ISTE. And they have a number of different standards. If you look at the ISTE standards, they have standards for teachers, which is what we've attended to in this case. And we've also attended to a couple of the other standards there as well. But then another thing that we'd like to mention as well is that we are really excited that we found one university that we can't name publicly because they're still waiting for final sign-off on paperwork, but it's been a pretty neat experience to find an accredited university within the United States that is willing to recognize competency-based learning rather than seat time. So teachers can choose, if they want, to be able to take one of these badges, as we've mentioned here, that are predefined, or they can create their own badge by stacking those smaller micro badges, as we talked about, and be able to earn one university credit through doing so. And so I feel excited about that because it seems like a tipping point if higher ed is going to start recognizing the work that individual teachers have done on their own through different learning platforms, whether it's ours or not. In other words, this learning transcends just this platform, and that's really the last part on that badge elements slide that I had out there. Is we want all of this to be open and transferable, portable, not just stuck in our particular silo or on our particular platform. We want people to be able to demonstrate their knowledge, with a competency here, so that when they click on the badge itself, the badge links out to metadata, and I want to explain metadata for quick sec. So metadata is just that information beyond the information. So if you want to think about it like you've got the badge itself that says digital citizenship, but then it links out to more information because the badge, the graphical representation itself, can just become a digital sticker if it's not meaningful to others beyond the initial first impression. And so to that end, we're trying to solve that problem by listing information that's relevant about the information or knowledge and competency someone has gained. So in this case, you see the title of the course and the descriptor of what they're able to do, and this gets back to the question about standards and who's recognizing it. You can see the course syllabus there. All of those have to be vetted and okayed by the university that we're collaborating with. And so there's an outside source that actually validates our own work that way. And then we line it up to the ISTE standards, and you can see the specific standards in this case that it attends to. The issue date, meaning when it was earned, the issuer, us, and soon to come will be information about the rubric, so you can link to the rubric that was used to evaluate competency or not. And then also a list of our evaluation process, so that for those, again, that click on the badge, they see this metadata, they have more trust and transparency into who's evaluating and assigning this badge. So I'll stop there for questions too.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, we're with Rich Dixon of the Professional Development Learning Network. He's sharing his digital badge system with us. And if you have questions for Rich, you can tweet them using hashtag BadgeChatK12. You can also use the question answer app on the Google Hangout on air. And Rich, I'm curious, when you're in a school working with teachers, when you're doing this professional development and you bring up, hey, you can earn a badge for this, what that conversation looks like, what the buy-in looks like, are you noticing, you mentioned a tipping point, is it increasing, or do the teachers have a choice? Can you
Yes,
talk about that a little bit?
yeah, let's definitely talk about it. I think that's one of the things I'm really excited about is that as badges are becoming more ubiquitous, whether it's through social media and other services like Yelp, oftentimes they'll grab onto badges that they might have seen in other platforms like that. I think the biggest exciting part is that some of our younger teachers I'm seeing as I'm out in schools and districts and doing professional development and offering the badges as a follow-up, a supplement, a way to go deeper and beyond just the moment of instruction on that day, is that they're able to connect some of the gamification that students are doing with the opportunity to provide meaning and relevancy around the skills that kids acquire in their own classrooms by building up their own badge system. So to be very concrete about it, there's been probably the most rewarding times, and it's happened a couple times now, where I've been in a school or a district or a larger consortium, and someone has said, oh my goodness, this is great, I want this, I'm really excited about this, and that our teachers have this opportunity, not just for the skills that they're going to learn through this, but also because they're going to experience learning in a different way that might encourage them to then replicate, improve upon what they've experienced with you, with their students in the classroom. So that means creating their own badging system, and it's brought up conversations in schools about what does that mean, and how can we create meaningful badges and provide rigor around that so that the skills that students earn provide those individual learning pathways, but also have transcendence beyond just that classroom, meaning if they're embedded with the right metadata that's clear enough that next year's teacher understands, parents understand, and hopefully I would love someday to get to see other employers taking metadata that schools have created within their digital badges and considering that when hiring someone, or perhaps if I can get bold enough, even for job placement within a job. So that's kind of the ultimate dream.
I
I
love
love
that. And
that. And
are
are
you
you
seeing any
seeing any
examples
examples
of
of
teachers
teachers
using these
using these
badges as a
badges?
way of knowing who else in their building might have these skills that they might be lacking in? So if I'm doing a unit on digital citizenship with my students, but I've not yet earned my digital citizenship badge, are you seeing teachers who are kind of looking to see who amongst their peers has micro-credentials that they can lean on for support?
Yeah, I think that's been really great, especially with TOSAs. Those are teachers on special assignment. Those might be teachers that don't have maybe a regular classroom, but they're there to provide instructional coaching and or modeling and or support, no matter what the topic is, whether it's EdTech or not. But we'll keep it to EdTech. And I think what's really been intriguing there is that they can demonstrate and start to help other teachers imagine the ways that they themselves can coach, if that makes sense. So if we go back to the slide where we have all the different courses, if I have a set of badges like this or other badges from other platforms, I can begin to communicate what skill sets I have to those that I'm serving, and then help them to visualize and begin to understand maybe the ways that those TOSAs can be utilized even more effectively. So by that I mean, if I am a classroom teacher and I haven't thought about social media and education before, but I see that that badge is listed, or it's a badge that's being described by the TOSA, that brings up some really great opportunities for discussion and ways that we can begin to engage educators around topics of meaning and begin to start to have some of that transformation take place. So to answer your question, yes, having the ability to represent cleanly through a title like digital citizenship or something else, but then also be able to click on that and have the rigor of the metadata there that clearly describes what was learned and who it was issued by is important.
I love that idea. It almost makes me think of teachers maybe helping them come up with questions that they might not know how to ask. When you're talking about how to leverage a TOSA who's there to help and you just don't know necessarily how they can help yet, that seeing these credentials might be a way to sort of kick or spark plug that conversation. I do want to go back to your metadata slide and ask a question about that, but before I do, for anybody who's watching with us live, we are with Rich Dixon, and you can use the Q&A app to ask questions of Rich, as well as tweet them in on hashtag BadgeChatK12. And actually, looks like we do have a quick question before we go to mine. This is from Don. How can badges bridge credit hour requirements? can CVE badges be combined with hour-based badges? And CVE, I'm guessing, is competency-based badges.
Sure.
How can they be combined with hour-based badges?
Yeah, I'll make a run at it. So one of the discussions we've had with our university partner is around that very subject. And here's where I would love to get your feedback as well. We're excited about the fact that they were really willing to say, hey, listen, to acquire, I'm just going to go back and pull up one other slide here, say the digital communication. If you were to go through that learning pathway that we've defined in there, and actually all of them for digital citizenship, that would take, if someone were to work through all of those materials, that would take the equivalent of 15 hours by the time they do the self-reflection pieces, by the time they upload their competencies. And so the learning itself represents that 15 hours. They themselves may have already previously, outside of this learning activity, acquired different bits of knowledge, and our university partner acknowledges and values that. They say, hey, it may not have been through your learning pathway, but they may have acquired over the years an understanding of digital law or digital aspects of digital citizenship. But the learning that you're having them demonstrate represents at minimum 15 hours or one clock hours, one university credit, worth of work. And whether that happened in one's formal sitting or that happened previously, we know that people have previous knowledge and are bringing that to the table. And we want to honor and respect that information that they previously brought to the table. So I hope that answers the question.
At the very least, it gets us started. Another question coming to us all the way from Brasilia. Kevin says he's looking to start badging at EAB. I'm guessing that is a university in Brasilia. And he gets asked, do you see badges being issued by individual schools or universities? And should we start our own badge system?
Well, that's a great question. I know that there's a couple of universities that are starting to issue badges already for some of their continuing education programs, and perhaps Noah and Sarah, you guys may know much more about this than I in terms of others, but so I am starting to see the beginnings of that at the university level, and I'm excited about that. I do think that an important tipping point is still yet to be made, and that is that transfer of into workforce, meaning when those skills are starting to be recognized and workforce opportunities are increased because of the cachet, if you will, or because of the credibility of the skill sets that have been earned. That's the next point that I'm really excited about. But to get back to your question, yes, I do think universities, maybe not quickly, but at least there is some movement there, and I'm looking forward to seeing that growing. And I do know that different schools and school districts are starting to begin their own badging systems, and the biggest challenge that I think that they're facing is when going through, as I talk with individuals, when we think through some of these badging elements, and this is not an exhaustive list, but oftentimes that evaluation piece, or maybe being able to have staff set aside to build up metadata and make sure that around a particular badge, being able to have the kind of support infrastructure really can be a challenge at times, and so I think it's just important to think through those different badge elements and see how labor-intensive which parts are going to be, and make sure that you have a sustainable plan to address each one of those challenges there. But very doable, and I would certainly encourage you taking a run at it in terms of trying and start your own badges there at the university.
Yeah, and we do have a couple comments along those lines. We have one Twitter comment saying that metadata within a digital badge allows parents to understand an educator's skills and competencies too. And we have another comment saying badges can be recognized by districts and universities. The key is the evaluation, which I think you were just talking about, of the competency. And I have a follow-up question to Kevin's question from Brasilia about when we start thinking about institutions creating their own systems. For me, one of the key challenges I think is this idea of equivalency, right? That my guess is that if we started looking around not just the Credly community, the Edmodo community, the Schoology community, the Badger community, the Badge List community, and across all these different badging platforms, my guess is we would find a lot of badges called digital citizenship, like the one you have up right now.
Sure.
And so do you have any thoughts just about that, with this idea of equivalency, to where we may have lots of different micro-credentials carrying the same name? And maybe this is the perfect slide to queue up your response to that with the metadata.
Yeah, I really do. Thanks for that question. I really do think that that's important because equivalency is something that is already, I feel, happening and is only going to continue to grow. And I think the metadata and having a rigorous description, meaning thorough, what the evaluator is looking for, obviously a description of what the educator is able to do, clearly stated, is really going to help keep the clutter down so that when we look at one badge, it can be clearly articulated through not only that description, but the link out to the syllabus and other metadata that may be included, and then compare that to another one so that there is that clear and clean articulation about what was a particular badge's meaning and how that is different than another one. So I think really the answer is within the metadata itself.
I love that answer, and maybe another kind of follow-up question for you there, Rich, is when you're talking about the metadata, and on this slide you have the description, you talked about links to rubrics. Do you have any thoughts just about best practices for when we are issuing these credentials? What on the issuing side we should be really considering to be best practices as far as the information we include on that metadata?
Yeah, I think first and foremost would certainly be the evaluation piece, meaning that the badge wasn't just issued because someone submitted something and it wasn't looked at. And I do have talked with administrators, again, as I mentioned early in this presentation, where that has had to happen because they just haven't had enough personnel to evaluate. So I think the rigor around the evaluation and having that is key. As I said, that's going to be the next thing that's going to be improved upon and built within the slide that you're looking at there will be that rubric so that not only it's clear about who's done the evaluation, but how they were judging it. Is really, really key there. So that I think that's important. Another thing that we're looking forward to growing into is giving the person that's been awarded to the badge the option to link to their evidence of learning so that the actual evidence, the learning that they've uploaded, can be optionally shown. We know that that's not comfortable for everyone. We've gotten lots of good feedback on that. But that's another feature that we're looking forward to building in the near future as well, is that, hey, I may want to be able to show, like a digital portfolio, not only the descriptor of what you've just provided for me with the metadata, but also a link so that someone can see that actual evidence and judge my work on their own, with their own eyes.
Yeah, I would think especially with adult badge earning that folks are really hungry to verify other people's evidence and not just trust PDLN that rigor was met and that the criteria was met and evidence shows it, but actually have folks provide the evidence so they can see for themselves. We do have another comment from Don here that there's a new trend, distributed badging networks, that creators can delegate badge issuing to qualified issuers, helping to build de facto students. So I'm guessing that something like that within your network, Rich, could be that some of the teachers who've earned digital badges in really exemplary ways can go on to become, I guess, validated endorsers, if you will, to issue your badges as well, so that they don't just come from PDLN, they can come from folks who PDLN has conferred upon them the ability to issue those badges themselves.
You know, I'm really glad that question came up because that is a distinguishing feature that we're really working through right now, is how to balance out, again, the quality and standardization of the evaluations with the opportunity for crowdsourcing. And we know that there's a number of different platforms out there that are getting put together fairly quickly, and they're looking for just individuals, once they've earned a badge, to be able to turn around and award someone else a badge. And we've decided to go a different direction. Because we're a sister company of a 16-year-old EdTech company, we have 16 years of incredible expertise around evaluating with a lot of rigor different educational learning artifacts and objects. And so our credentialed team of teachers actually are the group that we want to continue to focus on in terms of the ones awarding the badge, because they go through so much training. It takes them roughly 6 to 8 weeks of being trained before they're allowed to go out and review other artifacts with the other company. We're Lesson Planet, which provides open educational reviews. But when they are reviewing the submission from the teachers here, one of the distinguishers within our service is our ability to provide a high quality, standardized, and rigorous review process. Because we know that without that, one of the challenges, I think, within creating meaning within a badge is if there's not a standard understanding of what that badge means, one person's approval might not match somebody else's. And so I think that's always going to be a challenge within there. But the decision that we've made is to use our credentialed team of teachers that work for us and go through our quality control review process are the ones that are evaluating those badges there.
Really thoughtful stuff. And again, for anybody who's watching us live, you can ask Rich questions by tweeting at #BadgeChatK12, as well as by posting a question in our Q&A app on the Hangout itself. And Rich, I think that might be a really great segue to ask just in some of the challenges that you see. I think a lot of people watching live are pretty excited for you to announce the university that is going to be working with you, because that, as far as I know, is going to be the first or one of the first of its kind as a just sort of proof of concept that institution of higher ed would value something coming from outside. But also, just in putting this all together, what are some of the key challenges with that initiative, as well as just generally speaking, what you're seeing with open badges?
I think number one, for districts, having them understand the potential value of badges in general. And I think even above and beyond our platform and PDLN and what we're talking about today, I think administrators just starting to get a grasp of how this potentially can be a huge game changer, not just for the skill sets that that their teachers are working to acquire, but also how it can transform experientially for those teachers their understanding of how instruction can be done. And so I think there's communication and language around helping administrators and other decision makers at schools and districts be able to start understanding what this is really all about. And I think the second thing too, again, is going through and I think one of the challenges is what is that difference between just simply a digital representation, a digital sticker, if you will, or a badge that actually has metadata in it and can communicate some transcendent skill sets that are more than just simply, again, a graphical representation. I think those are kind of really about messaging, and I think helping people understand and experience it. I do want to call out, too, I think having the discussion with other educators about the value of awarding knowledge that wasn't necessarily captured in a particular formal lesson is also another really important piece. As I mentioned earlier with the university which I wish I could say I would love to do it, as soon as we can we'll pass that along, I promise. We'll tweet it with the hashtag BadgeChatK12 to everyone so you guys know. But we may be a few weeks off from being able to do that. But what I was excited about is that they were willing to understand and validate the fact that people are bringing prior experience to the table. That context that they have is valued and allows the learner to focus really on their individual needs rather than jumping through a bunch of hoops, and it makes learning more personalized than if that process wasn't there. So I think really it's just about communicating, being able to demonstrate effectively, and helping people to have that aha moment, which I know I've had, where the first time I really thought more about digital badges, I'm like, wait a second, if this is happening, that means the following other things could happen around getting to personalized learning.
And out of curiosity, when you talk about the teachers overcoming the challenge and just getting up to speed and getting really comfortable, are you seeing, or even better yet, tracking data where teachers who are earning badges are turning around and issuing badges in their schools?
Yeah, it's certainly not with our platform here, but I know that other services that do allow for that to happen, there is discussion of that for sure, and I know that there's other TOSAs out there that are learning to create their own badge system and are starting to explore that as well. Again, I think the big challenge there is really sustainability. How do we provide, again, that rigor, and then ensure that there really is somebody there that's going to own that issuing of that badge in such a way that, again, lends credibility to the badge and provides validity to the skill sets that have been earned. I think my biggest concern would be that the badge movement gets going and badges somehow lose meaning because they've been maybe awarded without any level of rigor or a close evaluation. So that's one of the challenges that we're trying to tackle.
Yeah, and that really gets right at the head of my next question I was going to ask, going back to what you brought up with stickers, and where we have a lot of examples of digital badges that aren't necessarily meaningful to an audience outside of a given classroom of learners. Do you view that as being a necessary step on the way to more meaningful badges, or do you view less meaningful badges as a risk factor and a threat to the overall success of badges that are meaningful?
Oh, I absolutely love that question. No, I think it's an important step. I don't think that everyone has to necessarily start there, but I think for those individuals, like a teacher, for example, or a building that's just getting started, I think if it's laid out and planned out ahead of time, that one of the iterations would be to simply just start with awarding someone a graphical image, but then at a certain point in time, or when a certain set of events have occurred, then moving to that deeper level, I think that is absolutely appropriate. I certainly wouldn't ever want to recommend to someone that they not start with digital badging because of their lack of either feeling prepared with the time or the skill set to move into metadata. But I certainly would think that and encourage people to have that road mapped out, that that is a goal, a tangible goal to get to at some point. And so I hope that answers the question, but the goal there, again, I think is if people could start and then grow into that, it would be great.
That is just so thoughtful. I really like that idea that maybe where you start is where you need to start. Almost like we talk about meeting our students wherever their level of readiness is. We can do that for teachers too, with the goal of getting them to this more meaningful place later on.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I agree. Thank you.
We had another comment here from Don. He likes your method. He says there's also many examples of successful issuer accreditation, not all of which are so-called crowdsourcing. So I guess Don's getting to a point that there's definitely more than one way to crack that one.
Yeah, thanks, Don. That's good input.
And awesome. It looks like Kate was able to get in here and join us. And we're in our final few minutes here with Rich Dixon of the Professional Development Learning Network and sharing the badges that they're using out in California with teacher professional development. And if you have any final questions, you can submit them using the Q&A app on the Hangout on Air or by tweeting them out at #BadgeChatK12. And before I ask my last question, Sarah, Kate, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask Rich? I see that Kate unmuted herself, but I don't hear her. My really final question that I wanted to ask you, Rich, before we see if there's any final questions, then let you go, is just any sort of ahas that you've had. You spoke about how you are constantly learning and things are fresh and new for you. Just any kind of aha moments that you've had just over this new school year that are really pushing your own thinking and growth around digital badges and open badges.
Hey, I think one of the best aha moments I have was when I was talking with Kate Tolnai, who hopefully she'll pull up here in just a second. And she was really pushing me on the concept of gamification. And I think at first I had a little hesitancy, I should say, around the term and somehow gaming being less than academically rigorous or whatever. And she really brought up a great point that we know that students are learning all the time. And we know that students within their own, whether they're using games, video games, or otherwise, are oftentimes being recognized and awarded, and so are we, for our recognition. And then that's a way for us to be able to demonstrate competency. And during that discussion, we talked about a lot of different elements, and she really opened up my eyes and encouraged me to start looking a little bit more at game design and how gamification can play a significant part in actually creating more depth and meaning within digital badges. And so for me, that was a really powerful aha moment that she's had. And it's still something that I'm not sure how it's necessarily going to flesh itself out within PDLN yet, but it's got me thinking. And I guess that points all the way back to this group. Questions like we had from Don or with others within the chat that we have weekly, or even these Google Hangouts, I feel like are absolutely phenomenal and continue to, hopefully for all of us, but I know certainly selfishly for me, continue to refine our thoughts and help us grow. But for me, I think it's that gamification concept that Kate has talked about. So, Kate, I know you're there, and I don't know if you want to speak to it or not.
We're not getting audio on Kate. I'm sorry, Kate. Keep trying, and if you get in, we'll stop talking and hear your lovely voice. Um, we do have a last question coming in from Judith here, Rich, where she wants to know, how do you and other badge issuers decide what topics to cover? And
That's
I
a
assume that means what competencies are we credentialing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of them, certainly we have to go back to those ISTE standards. And what are the standards that are being called out for teachers to become proficient and effective with their use and application of technology for the benefit of students for teaching and learning? And I think that's a huge guiding principle there. I think within that, we certainly can look at state standards and Common Core state standards for those of you that are in Common Core states. There's certainly plenty of technology integration in this case that happens there. We certainly do a tremendous amount, both myself and Jennifer Gibson, our CEO, who's also, as I mentioned earlier, fits that profile that I have of being a teacher, administrator, curriculum coordinator, and whatnot. And we do a lot of different speaking. We're out with others. We were recently at a California EdTech conference. And one of the things that we love to do is just get out and start talking with people. So we match up both those bigger skills, those bigger objectives, with some of the needs and tools that are becoming used more readily in the classroom by keeping involved with practitioners that are on the ground. Because at the end of the day, that's still our passion. What happens in the classroom, that of a practitioner, is of most importance to us.
I love that. And you mentioned earlier that you would really, one of the eyes on the prize for you is employers valuing credentials. Is that also a piece of the answer to this question as far as what you might think about credentialing?
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, it would be so wonderful, I think, if we can start to see, especially on the student side, students that graduate from our high schools with maybe non-traditional, or perhaps it could even be traditional. But I'm thinking specifically of those students who may not have a traditional learning pathway, but yet are incredibly gifted and can sometimes come out the gate, if you will, of graduating high school without the same kind of momentum that students who have had a success in the more traditional academic tracks have had. And I have oftentimes, when I run around town here in California, in Santa Barbara, where we're based, and have an opportunity to see former students, I oftentimes see them paired with jobs that we didn't necessarily formally work on during the time that they were with me as an elementary student. But I have just seen how gifted they are. I think it'd be wonderful if those students had an opportunity to get a head start on career and even salary advancement through being able to demonstrate competencies right out the gate to give them the momentum that they might not already have.
I love that answer, Rich. I think about when I was in high school, an app developer meant that I was in the kitchen getting appetizers ready to carry out to hungry clients, and these careers that didn't even exist, but how might my high school have been able to credential me in the skills that an employer that didn't even exist at the time would be interested in down the road, and so I really love your answer there. We do have a spate of questions just coming in here right at the very end. Don is in Canada. He's curious if you're seeing any uptake with the PDLN's badges amongst Canadian educators.
Great question. Yeah, we actually have had a little bit of interest there. We're certainly looking forward to growing into other opportunities there, but we are working with some, particularly in Vancouver area, that are considering and talking with us around what this might look like for them as well. So. I certainly know that it is of interest. We are working with others in places like the Virgin Islands. We actually recently were starting to work with someone overseas in Papua New Guinea. And so that's exciting as well because it starts to, I think, at least hint at the fact that badging and being able to recognize skill sets starts to become more than just contextually bound here in the U.S., number one, and then and it starts to attend to some of the needs that are happening in other locations, including Canada.
That is really awesome to hear. I love that. I mean, going to places as far flung as Papua New Guinea. That is really cool. We have another question here that coming from Ken, who is a kid from the Bronx. He asks, have any employers issued requests for specific badge topics?
Ooh, that is a great question. Yes, we have in school districts. not, say, an employer outside of that area. But yes, we've had a group that came to us. They were actually administrators, and they said, hey, we want to learn more about coding. We're going to teach kids about coding, but we need to learn some basics, and we need to understand what we're asking our teachers to do. And so there was an individual who built up a bunch of different learning pathways, and then we worked with them to create the badges and then to evaluate the work that the teachers or the administrators had done. So we do get requests from time to time, and we really get excited about those where people want to partner around creating content and a meaningful badge, but not outside. We haven't experienced it yet outside of the K-12 teacher and school district segment, but I'm really excited and very hopeful that at some point that's going to start to happen. And if anyone hears about it, I would love for them to announce it and use that hashtag #BadgeChatK12. I think it would be of great interest for all of us.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to be hearing about some stuff with that in the near future. Ken, if you're interested, I know Treehouse is a industry platform that a lot of people are hearing about, and I don't want to commit to this company sharing their badges yet, but there's a company, a pretty big $6 billion company that rhymes with, let's see, Whales Course that I've invited to come on our show and tell. So hopefully they will be joining us soon to share their industry-specific badges, of which they just in a few short months have issued over 150,000.
Wow.
So hopefully we'll be able to see those real soon. And our last question for you, Rich, from Judith, unless we get one more before we hit the hour, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, is Judith asks, can my school district team create our own pathway to badges we need for our specific circumstances and needs?
Yes, and the answer is yes. We've worked with different experiences, or different, I should say, situations where school districts have had their own individual needs. We're working with one in the middle of the country right now where there's a consortium, and they want a certain learning pathway. And so we're working with them. We've already created that, and they are starting in on that right away. So absolutely, we love that. We love to partner. We love to collaborate and get creative. And so to that end, the answer is yes, for sure, and I'd invite that. I think one last thing, going back to the previous question I want to attend to is that I actually spent a couple of years in the private sector in the IT world, and one of the things that I loved in that area was that regardless of whether people had a high school degree even, we actually had a couple people that didn't, all the way to those who had their master's degree in that organization, the skill sets that were being learned related to IT were essentially credentials. They weren't badges, but they were certificates. And it was really nice because they were all areas, or all, I should say, certificates that were awarded based off of competency. It had nothing to do with seat time. All they had to do was come in, be able to demonstrate, and then they would be awarded a certificate. And these are major corporations that were doing that. So it may go back to the earlier question about employers that do, are recognizing those. I think I would be amiss not to point out what has happened, certainly in the IT space, whether it's getting certifications from Microsoft or Cisco or other companies, and then being able to bring those to either open up job opportunities or to advance on the pay scale. So those would be a couple examples I can think of.
Well, Rich, just thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon, and to all the folks who watched live, anybody who watches this recording on YouTube, on the BadgeChatK12.com website as soon as we get around to embedding this. We certainly welcome you. We are at #BadgeChatK12 every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you are ever interested in proposing and co-moderating a topic, you can let us know that. Ken, who asked a great question, just shared with us that Stony Brook has their own badge system, it looks like. Please get in touch with us. We'd love to have you on one of our Badge Chat Hangouts for a show and tell, because really, we're all just at the tip of this giant iceberg figuring this out, and the more exemplars we can have to see what other folks are doing, we can start where they are, not where they were. And so anybody who's willing to ever be brave like Rich has been with us for the last hour and come and share your own work and put it out there for the world to see, you're just helping to raise all the other ships in the water. So again, Rich, thank you so much for your time this afternoon and for being with us.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, we'll see you next week back on Twitter. Same day, same time, and again, let us know if you ever want to throw out a topic, questions, or co-moderate with us. Thanks, everybody.